Diddy Combs has been denied bail in connection with the sexual abuse and sex trafficking charges he faces. And as Les Trent reports, the music mogul who once traveled by private jet to all those mansions is now in a jail that is notorious for its bad living conditions.
Music mogul Sean Diddy Combs spent his first night behind bars inside a facility that is being called Hell on Earth. The Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn is notorious for its appalling living conditions and rampant violence. It's so out of control inside that 4 federal judges are reportedly refusing to send any more prisoners here. Donald Trump's former fixer, Michael Cohen, spent a harrowing year in federal custody. He says for someone used to a life of luxury like Diddy, prison life is a severe shock.
You have a desk, you have a plastic chair, you have your bed with a 1.5-inch mattress, no pillow, and you also have a locker. So you basically have 3 feet by 5 feet to move around. So you have a basic 15 square feet. It is a horrible, horrible place.
Diddy's loyal, they offered his palatial $48 million home in Miami Beach and his private jets as bail. Today, they are even offering to restrict female visitors to his homes, except for his mother, daughters, and the mothers of his children if he is released. They told the judge the jail he was being sent to is dreadful, dirty, inhuman, and an ongoing tragedy.
How's your dad doing? How's your dad doing?
Hi, Dr. Umar.
My first question for you right off the top.
Yeah.
Because you have such a beautiful face, beautiful lips, beautiful nose. Them eyes are mesmerizing. Why you ain't got your own hair on, Jacqueline, as beautiful as you are? Talk to your brother.
It's just some braids.
It's just the braids?
I have my natural in my profile picture and lots of pictures of my hair out.
Okay. I want you to go natural because you're gorgeous. You don't need that. I want you King Kong, want you natural. Okay. So where you at, Jacqueline? What city?
In California.
What city? Near what big city? Give me a big city that you're close to.
Oakland.
Okay, you in the Oakland. Okay, you in the Bay Area. Mm-hmm. All right. Now, how's everything going in the Bay Area? What's the toughest thing about being a black woman in California's Bay Area?
I would say it's super multicultural here. Like a really multicultural.
So they're trying to multiculturalize us out of existence then.
I mean, I guess, but I think that because it's so multicultural, there's like a lack of emphasis on here because there's so many communities to cater to. So
Okay. And how's the dating scene out there? Are you in a relationship? Single? What's your status? Or you in a situationship where
I'm spoken for.
Okay. Powerful. Mm-hmm. And since you're spoken for, we'll move on. Shout out to the king. Where are you at on the Sean Puffy Combs situation?
I actually work in law. So
are you an attorney or you just work in law right
I
now?
work in law, but I'm studying to be
powerful. That's good. That's good. What's your take?
Well, I wouldn't say excited. I'm excited.
Wait a minute. You're not dating a...
No, he's very much African.
Okay, thank you. Because somebody said they thought it was a bunny. Okay,
no. Go ahead. No. But I'm interested to see how the trial goes and the precedents that it'll set for future cases like in the music industry.
Okay.
I am of the personal opinion that I believe that he is guilty. I don't believe. Let me dial back. Just judging from, and I used to live in Atlanta. I went to an HBCU, and one of the things that I had was, I don't want to disclose it, but it was very close to that camp. And just from the things I heard and from the people I spoke to, there's a reputation of him already within our own community, even before all of the noise. And judging by the complaint, Cassie's complaint, all of the different complaints that have gone out, while I do think that the volume of complaints that have gone in, there's going to be some people in there that are lying and trying to get a cash grab. I think there's substantial enough evidence to notice within our own community that he's a harm within our own community. He's a harm
to the community. Yeah. Let me ask you a question. And you may very well be right, so I can't dispute that. I don't know Sean Combs personally. But here's a question I have for you. Let's say say Sean Combs is a harm to the community.
Mhm.
What about all the thousands of Roman Catholic preachers who did black children in our neighborhood through the Roman Catholic Church? Why do you think we don't pursue them as aggressively as we pursue a Sean Combs?
Um, Let me break this down. Right? While I do agree that there are white people, like our white counterparts, definitely do fly underneath the radar. And within the Sean Combs case, there are intersections of racism within the structure of who we go after first. But I think that whenever we're having the conversation about Sean Combs and we add white people and what they do, I think that it's a deflection on to the current conversation about Sean Combs.
Even if we're talking about what white people did to black children, it's
As
still a deflection.
as a Christian, I don't agree with that. I don't believe that within any religious governing body that should be going on, like whatsoever. I think that everybody who does harm to anybody should be held accountable to the highest extent.
With that being said, because I completely agree with you, do you think that Black America is complicit in helping the white racist social order use black men as scapegoats for a larger systemic problem that the government does not care to target?
That's a loaded question. Complicit. I don't think that in an overall sense, I don't think we have enough political, socio-economic power to even be complicit. I
Even
think
though we watch more media than any other group in the country, you don't think we could be complicit by the not only the amount of media we consume, but how often we attack and malign and humiliate Sean Combs, for example, in the public eye. And we deflect from other cases like Donald Trump being found guilty, but you have black people saying they're still going to vote for him. So if we care about sex assault of women and we care about Sean Combs beating up Cassie, which I completely agree was wrong, but how do we then turn a blind eye to Donald Trump being found guilty in court, but yet you have black men and black women saying that they're still going to vote him in for president? At some point, don't we have to look at the selective morality, the conditional hypocrisy in the black community? Because it seems like when it's a popular black person, we're all in shaming them. We're all in lynching them. We're all in them being held accountable. But when white men do the same things to black women, when white men do the same thing to black children, we are not as aggressive in seeing to it that justice is served to them.
yeah, I when you were talking about justice in the context of government justice, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Because I studied political science in college, and I believe that within the context of getting justice to the American government system, there's always going to be a racial component in there
Okay.
that is using black people as the end to getting that justice. So I do agree with you, Dr. Umar, that is always going to be a fight. It's always going to be a fight within, if you're focused on getting justice in the context of the American government, that's always going to be a thing. I don't ever think that there was going to be a time where we're going to get away from watching black people be the first in line. But I think that sometimes we get so focused on that, and walk with me here, that there's an overcorrection that's done,
Okay.
which then defend the person that's up there,
Okay.
that's the vote, because we feel like we need to overcompensate for the lack of white people being held accountable. And I think that both of those issues need to be handled separately. While I think that what I think we need to be doing is looking at the process in which the federal government, like I believe they're called like the biggest law firm in the entire world is the United States Federal, um, uh, the federal, forgot their official name, but they're like the biggest law firm in the world. They have unlimited funds to go and do whatever they want to the point where their of conviction rate is like over 97% whenever the feds get involved, right? I think that if we really wanted equity within finding people accountable for what they do, we need to start there. Because I think that when we focus on, oh, Sean Diddy Combs it's an attack on a black man, I think that that gives him an in to play on that, to get away from what he's done and how he's harmed our community. Because, you know, I'm a black woman. I don't ever like to see black women being harmed, black women being talked about. We're also not taking into account of how the music he makes and the culture that he fed into wasn't helpful for black women, wasn't helpful for dark-skinned black women. So aside from the fact that he's a black man and that
But you're not saying that Puffy should, speaking purely on the music aspect, you're not saying that Puffy should be the scapegoat of 50 years of a hip hop music genre that has
no.
pervaded largely, miscegenation through its music. You wouldn't make Puffy the scapegoat for that, would you? Because a lot of Bad Boys music,
Yeah.
although probably not positive, it wasn't as hardcore and raunchy as what we see in a lot of popular gangster rap. It was more crossover type music, if you
No,
would. So I don't.
yeah. I definitely agree. I don't think he was like the worst of the worst, but when talking about holding him accountable for that, I mean within an intercommunity context.
Okay.
Like, oh, maybe he's the starter for that conversation, but there's a bigger conversation that needs to be had. And I think even just like the culture that they fed into, the drugs, the parties, while he may not have been the component of that music, we have to look at how much of that music he was involved in, all the music he was pushing, how central he was in feeding the culture, bringing all these people together. Because whether or not, well, we'll let the trial.
Let me ask you this. Let me ask you this.
Mm-hmm.
And very great commentary, by the way. What percentage
Mm-hmm.
of the energy Black people are given the Puffy trial with regard to condemning him and wanting to throw away the key? Let's say Black women. What percentage would you say is directly attributable to self-hatred and the love of seeing Black people fall from grace? Would you say that all the energy being directed from our community towards Puff is purely based on a thirst for justice? Or do you see Willie Lynch at play somewhere in this? And if so, what percentage of the energy would you attribute to self-hate and Black people's tendency to want to see each other fall from grace?
Um, it would be, honestly, it'd be ingenuine of me to give you a percentage, because I would need to see, I would need more research.
Okay.
But I think that there's a bigger, there's some teeth to that. There's some truth to Black people wanting to see each other fail, right? And liking that. But I also think that in a wider context of our culture, I think that there's an obsession with celebrity. We could even see that that permeating through different parts of culture. Like, example, just in religion, like the most popular pastors aren't the best pastors. They're the pastors that are the most popular, you know? And we're so obsessed with sensationalism. I think it's because, I forgot what book I was reading that basically talked about this, but because for so long Black people has seen them, like, have self-actualized in America as less than. I think that when we see Black people at a higher level than us, we then attributed their identity to ours. So their failures are our failures and their successes are our successes. And we see like each other in tandem. Whereas like with white people, you could see another white people do bad and you could be like, oh, that has nothing to do with me, right? But with Black people, we attach so much of our identity to another Black person. So I think that there's an aspect of self-hatred in there when we see another Black person fail. I think it's a little bit of projecting there, and you want to hate on them a lot, and you like the drama of it, and it's really sensationalized to you. So I think that it would do us a lot of good, if we stop sensationalizing regular human beings, like, in general. And that's not just like Black people, that's just like the entire country in general, because it's harmful. And even when we saw, like, bringing it back to Diddy, even when we saw the conversation going on when he was with Young Miami, and they were very harmful rhetoric was coming out of that relationship, like, oh, get a bag, oh, it doesn't matter what our relationship status is, like, you're a proponent for Black marriage, but Diddy's out here having babies with multiple women and sleeping with a younger woman, and basically parading around the fact that they don't really care about marriage, and it's about the bag, and it's fun, and it's this, and all of that is happening. We're idolizing that, like, we're saying that we love it, and it's a lot of young women's goal to have to be in that position.
Got you. My last question for you, good sister. Statute of limitations
Yes.
on sexual harassment, and sex crimes accusations. And mind you, my background is psychology. So I know how often Black women, I know how often you guys are sexually harassed. Um, Black women suffer sex assault more than any other women in America, and your victims are less likely to pay for it. So I understand the seriousness. But as a woman and as someone who studies law, what is your opinion on women, Black and white, being able to come out of the woodworks 20 years later and say, this happened to me? Now, I understand you can't put a timeline on trauma. You can't put a timeline on shame. You can't put a timeline on fear. You can't put a timeline on vulnerability. I get it. But do you think something needs to be done about this situation where it appears that women are taking advantage of the law and taking advantage of successful men to some degree by coming out 15, 20 years later and say, he did this to me? And in many cases, there's almost no evidence because it happened so long ago. There's almost no evidence that could prove the person was guilty. So even if they don't lose in court, they still lose in the court of public opinion. As a woman, if you had to vote on this, if you had to make a decision, would you put a limit? Would you say it should always remain unlimited, that a woman could come out 30 years later, 40 years later? Or would you put a limit somewhere? And if so, what kind of a limit do you think you would probably consider?
Um,
Statute of limitations.
Obviously, within context of the law, it's very it's very important that you take your time with laws, because while you may want to intend the law to help somebody, that can set precedents. There's always a possibility for precedents to be set for that law to be manipulated by people, right? So I think that I wouldn't go into making a law focused on who can manipulate it, because as we've seen in sexual abuse cases, and rape cases and allegations, there's really, like, when you look at it in the long term, there's really little to no consequences for the men that get called out. Like, they rarely ever have any long-term consequences for it.
Well, most of the time, sorry to cut you off, what we're seeing as far as celebrity men is civil suits. So you're right. You know, the statute of limitations for the criminal has already exhausted itself. So now they're purely going for the bag. They're purely going for the money. So let's reduce it to that. Let's reduce it to a situations where the statute of limitations to bring a criminal suit have collapsed. The time has ran out. They've exhausted the statute of limitations to bring criminal suit. So they're purely looking at civil, which means they're purely looking at money. In situations where women did not file within the appropriate timeline for a criminal suit, they let that go by, where this person could have been convicted and went to jail. They let that go by. So now they're dealing with civil and they're purely going after the money. Do you think there should be some limits there? And if so, how long would you allow after the window to bring a criminal case has expired? How much time would you give a woman to bring civil suit for financial damages?
I honestly, one of my honest answer,
Yes.
would I would make it in like somewhere, or I would do at least 15 years. And let me tell you why.
Okay.
And as you know, you study psychology. Psychologist says that the psychology of an abuse victim is like your brain blocks out the trauma and you don't even remember a lot of it. It takes a long
Mhm.
time back into your body to remember what happened.
Mhm.
And not only that, the ramifications of trying to heal, keep you out of work, can ruin a lot of things in your life that could prevent you from financially providing for yourself and paying for
Okay.
your. And what I think what I would focus more on looking at is not only the discovery process of evidence, like what evidence is going to look like. I would also accompany that law with societal changes, like within hospitals, like
Okay.
work with, make rape kits more available, like. And also it's really difficult because like the culture of society makes women not want to come forward, because when you go to the police station, you got to tell the story over and over again to like 3 different police officers and an investigator and this person before it gets done. It's really traumatic. So I would account for all of that, and I would do at least 15.
So let me ask
I
you this. Understanding the 15. Here's my question for you as a woman, because I'm a man, so I can't even begin to understand that type of pressure, that type of pain, that type of shame.
Mhm.
Help me understand this. You had about, hypothetically, you had 10 years
Mhm.
to bring this to criminal court where your aggressor could have been locked behind bars.
Mhm.
You still have to go through the rape kit. You still have to go through the multiple interviews. You
Mhm.
still have to go through the scrutiny. You let that go
Mhm.
for him to really be held accountable for what he did. You let that go. And then you wait until it goes into the time period for civil case.
Mhm.
Still got to do the rape kit. You still got to do the investigation. You still got to face the scrutiny. In other words, you go through the exact same process, albeit you're doing it later. So I do understand what you're saying. She needed time to process and prepare herself. I do understand that. But if you're going through the same thing all over again, how is getting money for sex assault going to make you feel better than the perpetrator being locked behind bars? Will money make you feel justice was served more than the perpetrator actually being locked up in jail?
I
Help me understand how money can be a better price to pay than prison time.
Well, let me tell you this. Money was the same reason why he felt empowered to do that to her. So I can't think of anything more empowering to take that back.
So you would, so I'm still free. I'm not going to jail. I'm
Mhm.
a billionaire. I'm a multi-millionaire.
Mhm.
I give you 20, 30, 40 million dollars.
Mhm.
I'm still living my best life because I can afford it. And you feel that that is a better example of justice being served than this man actually going to jail and being put behind
Well,
bars?
the legal system doesn't. She can't. Of course, she'd probably love to see him in jail, but that's
But
not.
she could
I
have.
and let me cook Dr. Umar.
Mhm.
Okay. So one, she is, because she was brave enough to tell her story, which led to other people telling their story, which led to now the feds getting involved. So I would say Cassie got the money and she got to see the man in jail. So to me, Cassie won, right? But
But remember, his Fed indictment has nothing to do with the
I
Cassie
know
domestic.
he's still in jail, and she was definitely a proponent, and the feds wanted to take a look at it, especially with that videotape of him coming out, right? So that for one. And for two, in terms of like would money, of course it would never do that. Would, when, if your child gets murdered and you go to jail and somebody getting 15 years because of their own trauma that they went through in their life that caused them to be a murderer, would that give you justice? No, it wouldn't. But I think the release of being able to tell your story, also too with the fact of how major he was, and so many people who are around them and who are witnessing what's going on, and for having to feel so powerless for so long, for them, for the money from her, from her music not being had, from him stringing her along and using his power to be like, I'm going to get you a career, I'm going to get you everything you wanted, all the years of having to be in rehab for all the drug abuse that he's put her on. I think that money would do her very well. And I think that the money is helpful, but I think it's symbolic of power, because that same, like I said earlier, that same money that she's getting was the same money that he held over her head, so she could be the little fine thing on his arm to the whole music industry. So I would say that underneath the constraints of the United States justice system, there's no way that there's possibility for a victim to get 100% justice because your sexual integrity is gone, the person that was killed is gone. We can't bring that back. But I think that the reward is symbolic of something bigger, personally. So I would say
Okay, gotcha. Last question for you, beautiful. And you yourself may not know men who are guilty of domestic abuse,
Mhm.
but most women do, because Black women are significantly victimized by domestic abuse
Mhm.
by Black men. Teenagers, regular age women, elderly women are abused. Help me understand if it isn't hypocrisy, not for you, but speaking for the sisterhood, Black women in general, if it isn't hypocrisy, how do we explain all these Black women who want to see Puffy fried, but you have men you know in your personal life who beat their women, have beat their women, and you've never done nothing about it? Your father, your brothers, your uncles, your nephews, your friends, your college homies, all of these Black men who have put hands on women that
Mhm.
Black women are aware of, never said or did anything about it, but yet they want Puffy to get fried. Is that hypocrisy? Is that a double standard? And if it isn't, how is it not?
2 points. One, absolutely, it's a double standard. I think that within their own environment, they probably feel powerless. So Puffy is definitely used as an outlet for them to express the anger that they probably feel powerless to express in their own
Do
environment. So I do see
you
that.
think that's fair?
That's what I was about.
Okay,
That was my second.
okay, okay.
My second point was that I don't think that's fair, and I think that the I think that women, we need to do a better job at standing next to each other and creating safe spaces for each other to tell each other these things, so we can, if we start holding the men around us accountable,
Mm,
it'll be easier for us to hold men accountable, like in general within our community. And I just also want to land on this, and it's something I probably have to do better with as well. Like,
okay.
I, in the constraints of me, Christian, I feel is we all have things in our closet. We all have skeletons that, if they came out, like the deepest, darkest, worst things that we came out are bad, right? And one thing about it, and I'm standing 10 toes down on Black women, Diddy should be held accountable. But I think that at the end of the day, I really do hope that he takes this as an opportunity to reflect, and to really sit down, look at himself in the mirror, and want to do right by his victims in turn. do better for himself and create a new life for himself as much as he can
Mm.
with the circumstances. So while I do think there's a level of accountability that we need to have for Diddy, but I think we need to look at ourselves more and also extend a level of grace. And I know people, you're hearing it with her ears. I heard it with her ears too. But we can't at the same time say that, fry him and everything, and then be on the streets and advocate and hold space for the Menendez brothers and hold space for people in our community who have done wrong with drug convictions in the 80s and the 90s. At that time, Black people were saying fry them now, and now 15 years later we're looking back at them with more empathy. So hold him accountable, but also hold grace and pray for him to change. But
Action. Well said, Queen. I'm proud of you. One of the greatest conversations I had with the young sister. Keep up the good work. And next time I see you, you better be natural. Black Queens forever. Snow bunnies never, my sister.
I know.
Great job. Great job. All right, babe. Take care. Jacqueline did good, y'all, didn't she? That young sister held her own. That was beautiful. That was a very, very intelligent conversation. Who tapping in next? Who tapping in next? This is the Prince of Pan-Africanism coming to you live from Dallas, Texas. Live from Dallas. I need some tickets. Tyrese, I need them tickets, big homie. Tyrese, I need them tickets, big homie.